Imagine standing on the black sand beach of a volcanic island in the middle of an endless ocean. The waves break gently against the shore, carrying with them the salt spray of thousands of miles of open water. Behind you rise slopes covered in strange vegetation, plants that exist nowhere else on Earth, their leaves shaped by winds that have blown uninterrupted across the Pacific for millions of years. The nearest landmass, a continent teeming with familiar life, lies hundreds or even thousands of miles beyond the horizon, so far that it might as well be on another planet. Here, in this isolated world, life follows different rules. A small bird that arrived by chance thousands or perhaps millions of years ago, blown off course by a storm or carried on unusual winds, has descendants that bear only the faintest resemblance to their ancestors. Some have beaks like pliers, thick and powerful, perfect for crushing seeds that would defeat any other bird. Others have beaks like daggers, long and sharp, ideal for probing into flowers or chiseling into bark. Still others have beaks like delicate tweezers, curved and precise, shaped for extracting nectar from tubular blossoms. Each variation represents a solution to a different problem, a different way of making a living on these remote shores. Each generation has written a new chapter in evolution's most extraordinary experiments. Experiments that can only happen in isolation, far from the competitive pressures and genetic mixing of the mainland. Welcome to Bedtime Biology, where science meets serenity. Each night, we explore the quiet wonders of the natural world, calming your mind and sparking your curiosity. If you like these videos, please consider subscribing to the channel and commenting below if you have any feedback or suggestions for topics of future episodes. Islands are among the most remarkable places on Earth for understanding how life changes over time, how species arise, and how evolution shapes the living world. Cut off from the continents by vast stretches of ocean, separated by hundreds or thousands of miles of open water that act as barriers as effective as walls of stone, these fragments of land become living laboratories where evolution runs wild, unfettered by some of the constraints that operate on mainland populations. The same forces that shape life everywhere, natural selection, genetic drift, random mutation, and the slow accumulation of change over time, operate here with unusual clarity and often dramatic speed. On islands, we can watch evolution's fingerprints emerge in ways that would take millennia to become visible on vast continents, where gene flow between populations blurs the boundaries between groups and slows the pace of divergence. We can see how isolation transforms the familiar into the extraordinary, how a single ancestor, a bird or plant or insect that somehow made the crossing from mainland to island, can bloom into dozens of unique species over the course of a few million years, each exquisitely tailored to its particular corner of an island world, each bearing the marks of adaptation to conditions found nowhere else. The diversity we find on islands is remarkable, not just for its abundance, but for its strangeness. Animals that lose the ability to fly, finding safety on the ground in the absence of predators. Birds that grow beaks so specialized that they can only eat one or two types of food. Lizards that become giants, dwarfing their mainland cousins. Elephants that shrink to the size of ponies. Plants that evolve into trees. The patterns repeat across islands worldwide, from the tropical Pacific to the cold southern oceans, from tiny atolls barely rising above the waves to massive land masses like Madagascar and New Zealand that have been isolated for tens of millions of years. These patterns emerge because islands offer unique evolutionary opportunities and impose unique constraints. To understand island evolution, we must first understand how species reach islands in the first place, how they establish populations, and what happens in the generations that follow as selection and drift shape isolated populations into forms that would never arise on the mainland. The story of island evolution begins with arrival, with the rare and often desperate journeys that bring colonizing species to shores they have never seen. For a species to colonize an oceanic island, especially one that has never been connected to a continent, that formed de novo from volcanic eruptions in the middle of the ocean, requires an extraordinary journey. The distances involved can be staggering. The Hawaiian Islands, for instance, lie more than 2,000 miles from the nearest continent. The Galapagos sits 600 miles off the coast of South America. St. Helena in the South Atlantic is over 1,000 miles from the nearest land. For terrestrial organisms that cannot swim across open ocean or fly for days without rest, reaching such islands seems impossible. And yet, somehow, life made it there. Birds can fly across open water, and for winged creatures, islands are theoretically reachable. But even for birds, crossing hundreds or thousands of miles of ocean is no small feat. Most songbirds cannot make such journeys under normal circumstances, lacking the stamina or the navigational ability to stay on course over featureless seas. But occasionally, storms blow migrating birds far off their intended paths. Powerful winds associated with hurricanes or typhoons can carry birds vast distances, depositing them exhausted on island shores far from where they meant to be. A bird that finds itself in such a situation has two choices: perish in the attempt to fly back, or make the best of its new home. If even a small group, a mated pair or a pregnant female, manages to survive and reproduce, a new population can establish itself. This is the founder effect, the beginning of a new evolutionary trajectory. For plants, the mechanisms of dispersal are different, but no less remarkable. Some seeds have adaptations for floating, protective coats that keep them viable in seawater for weeks or months, allowing them to drift on ocean currents until they wash up on a distant beach. Coconuts are famous for this, drifting between tropical islands and germinating wherever they land. Other seeds are small and light, equipped with downy fibers or wings that catch the wind. Carried aloft by powerful storms, they can travel enormous distances, blown across hundreds of miles, before settling to Earth on some remote island. Still others hitchhike, caught in the mud on the feet of seabirds, or stuck to feathers, or swallowed and passed unharmed through digestive systems to be deposited on new shores, along with a bit of fertilizer to help them get started. For non-flying animals, for mammals and reptiles and amphibians and land invertebrates, reaching oceanic islands seems even more improbable. And yet, they too have made the crossing. The mechanism is rafting, one of the strangest and most unlikely seeming processes in biogeography. In tropical regions, heavy rains and floods can tear loose mats of vegetation from riverbanks, great tangles of roots and soil and plants that float downstream and out to sea. Occasionally, animals are trapped on these floating islands when the flood comes, or climb aboard seeking safety from rising waters. Small mammals, reptiles, insects, even amphibians, if they are lucky enough to have water trapped in the vegetation, can survive for days or weeks on such rafts, drifting wherever currents and winds take them. Most perish, victims of thirst, starvation, or drowning when storms swamp their precarious vessels. But occasionally, very occasionally, a raft makes landfall on an island, and the survivors disembark to colonize a new world. These are rare events, chance occurrences, that might happen once every few thousand or million years for any given species. The odds against successful colonization are astronomical, yet over geological time, over millions of years, even very rare events will occasionally occur. And when they succeed, when a pregnant female or a small group of individuals, or even a single gravid reptile, manages to establish a breeding population on a new island, evolution has fresh canvas to work with, a blank slate on which natural selection can paint new patterns. What happens next depends on what that island offers and what it lacks. The colonizers arrive with the genes of their mainland ancestors, genomes shaped by millions of years of continental life, millions of years of adapting to ecosystems, teeming with competitors and predators and parasites. But the island is different. Resources are distributed in unfamiliar patterns. Fruits that were common on the mainland are rare here, or absent entirely, while other foods, ignored back home because better options existed, are suddenly abundant. Predators that prowled the forests back home, that forced ancestors to be wary and quick, are absent here, perhaps unable to make the crossing, or perhaps simply not yet arrived. Competitors that would have driven them from certain niches, that competed for the same foods or nesting sites, never made the crossing. The colonizers find themselves in a world of opportunity, a landscape with ecological roles waiting to be filled, food sources going unexploited, habitats unoccupied. And because the island is isolated, because the ocean acts as an impassable barrier for most organisms, there is no steady flow of new individuals arriving from the mainland to dilute the gene pool, to introduce fresh genetic variation that might slow the pace of evolution, to outcompete the descendants of that first founding population with adaptations honed on the mainland. The island population is on its own, isolated, free to evolve in response to local conditions without interference from mainland genes. In this isolation, genetic changes that might have disappeared in a large continental population, swamped by the more common mainland genotypes, can persist and spread. Small populations, like those that found island populations, experience stronger genetic drift, random changes in gene frequencies that occur just by chance when populations are small. Traits that are neither particularly helpful nor harmful can become fixed in the population simply through luck, because the individuals carrying those traits happen to be the ones that survived and reproduced. This randomness adds an element of unpredictability to island evolution, a contingency that means no two islands, even if they are colonized by the same species and offer similar environments, will necessarily evolve in the same direction. But alongside genetic drift, natural selection also operates, and often with particular intensity. If a mutation happens to make a bird's beak slightly better at cracking a particular type of seed, and if that seed is abundant on the island while other foods are scarce, the bird with that mutation will leave more offspring than its competitors. Those offspring inherit the advantageous beak shape, and over generations, as selection favors individuals with ever more efficient beaks, the entire population shifts. The beaks grow thicker, stronger, more specialized for the abundant seed type. What began as a small variation becomes, over thousands of generations, a defining characteristic of the species, something that sets it apart from its mainland ancestors and from populations on other islands that faced different selective pressures. Meanwhile, perhaps on a different part of the same island, where the environment is different, where different plants grow and different foods are available, or perhaps on a neighbouring island in an archipelago, where isolation has allowed a separate population to establish itself. Descendants of the same ancestral species face different conditions. Here, instead of hard seeds, insects hide in the crevices of bark, their soft bodies rich in protein for any bird that can extract them. A longer, thinner beak proves advantageous, one that can probe into cracks and crevices that a thick, seed-crushing beak cannot reach. Natural selection pulls this population in a different direction, favouring individuals with longer, more slender beaks, until, over time, the two populations, descended from the same ancestor, look quite different from each other. Given enough time, measured not in years or decades, but in thousands of generations, these two populations become so different that they can no longer interbreed, even if they were to meet again, even if individuals from one population dispersed to the other's island. The changes that accumulated in isolation, changes in beak shape and body size, in songs and mating displays, in habitat preferences and behaviours, have created reproductive barriers. The two populations have become separate species, each bearing the stamp of the particular island environment that shaped them, each representing a unique evolutionary experiment. This process, where a single ancestral species gives rise to many new species, each adapted to different ecological roles or different environments, is called adaptive radiation. It is one of the most spectacular patterns in island evolution, one that has played out on islands around the world in groups as diverse as birds and insects, plants and snails, reptiles and mammals. The pattern emerges with such regularity that scientists can almost predict it. Take an island archipelago, a chain of islands near enough to allow occasional dispersal between them, but far enough apart that populations remain mostly isolated. Add a founding species with no close relatives already present. A species arriving in an ecosystem where many ecological niches are vacant. Wait a few million years, long enough for mutations to accumulate, for selection to act, for populations to diverge and split, and you will likely find not one species, but a whole family of related forms, a radiation of descendants from that original colonist, each occupying its own niche, each adapted to its own way of life. The most famous example comes from the Galapagos Islands, a volcanic archipelago straddling the equator 600 miles off the coast of Ecuador. When Charles Darwin visited these islands aboard HMS Beagle in 1835, he collected specimens of small birds that he initially mistook for an assortment of blackbirds, wrens, and finches from different families. Only later, when the ornithologist John Gould examined the specimens back in England, did the truth emerge. These were not representatives of different bird families at all. They were all closely related finches, descended from a single ancestor that had arrived from South America perhaps 2 to 3 million years earlier. Today, we recognize about 18 species of these birds, collectively known as Darwin's finches. Their diversity is extraordinary. The large ground finch has a beak like a heavy nutcracker, massive and powerful, capable of crushing seeds so hard that no other bird on the islands can handle them. The cactus finch has a longer, more pointed beak, perfect for probing the flowers and fruits of prickly pear cacti. The woodpecker finch has evolved behavior as remarkable as its physical form, using twigs or cactus spines as tools to extract insect larvae from holes in tree bark, a rare example of tool use in birds. The warbler finch has a delicate, needle-like beak for picking tiny insects from leaves and branches. Each species represents a different solution to the problem of making a living on these harsh volcanic islands. The beaks are not the only differences. The birds vary in body size, in the songs they sing, in their feeding behaviors and habitat preferences. Some live in the arid lowlands, others in the humid highlands. Some are found on multiple islands, others are restricted to just one. But genetic studies confirm what anatomical comparisons suggested, that all these diverse forms trace back to a common ancestor, a finch-like bird from mainland South America that somehow made the long crossing to the Galapagos. In the absence of other songbirds to compete with, in an environment offering many different types of food and habitat, that ancestral population split and split again, its descendants spreading across the islands and diverging into the spectacular array we see today. The story is not quite as simple as it might seem, though. Recent research has revealed that the evolutionary history of Darwin's finches involves not just branching divergence, but also occasional hybridization, different species interbreeding and exchanging genes when they come into contact. On some islands, 2 or 3 finch species live side by side, occasionally producing hybrid offspring. Most of these hybrids are less fit than their purebred parents, but sometimes a hybrid inherits a combination of traits that allows it to exploit resources in a new way. There are even documented cases of entirely new finch populations arising from hybridization, founding populations with a mix of characteristics that set them apart from both parent species. Evolution, it turns out, is not always a clean process of branching and separation. Sometimes the branches fuse back together, creating new possibilities. The Galapagos finches are remarkable, but they are not unique. Halfway across the Pacific, the Hawaiian Islands host an even more spectacular adaptive radiation, one that began with a different kind of bird and produced an even greater diversity of forms. The Hawaiian honeycreepers are a group of songbirds that evolved from a single ancestral finch-like species, likely a rose finch from Asia, that colonized the Hawaiian archipelago between 5 and 7 million years ago. From that single colonization event, more than 50 species of honeycreepers evolved, each with its own distinctive beak shape, coloration, and ecological role. The diversity of Hawaiian honeycreepers surpasses even that of Darwin's finches. Some honeycreepers have short, thick beaks for crushing seeds, much like some of the Galapagos finches. Others have long, curved beaks perfectly shaped for sipping nectar from the tubular flowers of native Hawaiian plants. The Akiapola owl has one of the most bizarre beaks in the bird world, with a straight, sturdy lower mandible for chiseling into wood and a long, curved upper mandible for extracting insects from the holes it creates, essentially combining the roles of a woodpecker and a nectar feeder in a single bird. The now extinct mamos had extremely long, decurved beaks, some reaching lengths that seemed almost impractically long, perfectly matched to particular species of Hawaiian lobelioid flowers. The explosion of diversity among Hawaiian honeycreepers was driven by the same forces that shaped the Galapagos finches, ecological opportunity, geographic isolation, and time. The Hawaiian Islands are among the most isolated in the world, more than 2,000 miles from the nearest continent. They formed sequentially as the Pacific Plate moved over a volcanic hotspot, with the oldest islands in the northwest and the youngest in the southeast. As each new island emerged from the ocean, it provided fresh territory for colonization. Honeycreepers from older islands would occasionally disperse to these newly formed lands, finding empty forests where few other birds competed for resources. Each island became a stage for further diversification, with populations on different islands evolving in different directions, sometimes reconverging and hybridizing when birds dispersed between islands, creating a complex web of evolutionary relationships. Studies using modern genetic techniques have revealed that the most intense period of honeycreeper diversification occurred between 4 and 2.5 million years ago, after the formation of the islands of Kauai and Oahu, but before the youngest islands of Maui and Hawaii appeared. During this window, the basic body plans and beak types that characterize different honeycreeper lineages evolved. Later, diversification involved fine-tuning and further specialization, with closely related species evolving subtle differences that allowed them to coexist on the same island by partitioning resources. The tragedy of the Hawaiian honeycreeper story is that we have lost much of this evolutionary masterpiece. More than half of the honeycreeper species that evolved over millions of years have gone extinct, most within the last few centuries. The arrival of Polynesians and later Europeans brought profound changes to the Hawaiian Islands. Forests were cleared for agriculture. Rats, cats, mongooses, and other predators were introduced, either deliberately or accidentally. Mosquitoes carrying avian diseases arrived in the 19th century, and honeycreepers, which evolved in the absence of such diseases, had no immunity. Today, many of the surviving honeycreeper species are critically endangered, restricted to tiny patches of high-elevation forest where mosquitoes are still rare. Climate change is pushing mosquitoes higher up the mountains, shrinking the safe zones year by year. The loss of honeycreepers represents not just the extinction of individual species, but the erasure of millions of years of evolutionary history, unique solutions to the challenges of survival that can never be recreated. It is a reminder that island species, shaped in isolation for millions of years, are often exquisitely vulnerable when that isolation is broken by human activity. Adaptive radiation is not limited to birds. On Madagascar, a large island that separated from the African continent about 88 million years ago, and from India about 47 million years later, an entirely different group of mammals has undergone an extraordinary evolutionary diversification. The lemurs of Madagascar are primates, relatives of monkeys and apes, but they evolved in complete isolation from other primates for tens of millions of years. Today, Madagascar is home to more than 100 species of lemurs, ranging from tiny mouse lemurs that weigh just 30 grams to the indri, which can reach 9 kilograms. Some are nocturnal, others diurnal. Some eat primarily leaves, others fruit, insects, or a mix of foods. Some live in large social groups, others are solitary. They occupy nearly every ecological role that primates can fill, from the forest canopy to the ground. The ancestors of modern lemurs probably reached Madagascar by chance, perhaps rafting across the Mozambique Channel on floating vegetation sometime between 50 and 60 million years ago. This was long after Madagascar had separated from the African mainland, ruling out the possibility that lemurs were simply stranded there when the continents drifted apart. Once on the island, these early lemurs found themselves in a world with abundant forests but no other primates and very few mammalian competitors of any kind. Madagascar at that time lacked the monkeys, apes, and many other groups of mammals that dominate continental ecosystems. The lemurs diversified to fill the vacant niches, evolving into the diverse array we see today. Though many of the largest and most unusual species have been lost to extinction since humans arrived on the island about 2,000 years ago. Madagascar's lemurs show patterns of evolution that parallel those seen in island birds. Different species have evolved distinct body sizes, diets, and behaviors. The aye-aye, one of the strangest primates in the world, has rodent-like front teeth for gnawing into wood and an elongated middle finger for extracting insect larvae. A body plan so unusual that early naturalists were not sure it was a primate at all. Ring-tailed lemurs spend much of their time on the ground in the dry forests of southern Madagascar, living in troops and using their distinctively banded tails in social displays. Indris, the largest living lemurs, are specialized leaf-eaters with complex stomachs for fermenting plant material, and they announce their territories with haunting songs that carry through the forest for miles. The evolutionary history of lemurs has not been one of simple branching, just as with the finches. Recent genetic studies have revealed that different lemur lineages hybridized occasionally, exchanging genes even as they diverged into distinct species. There is also evidence that lemur diversification occurred in bursts, accelerating during certain periods and slowing during others, possibly in response to changes in climate and vegetation on Madagascar. The island's highly seasonal climate, with distinct wet and dry seasons, may have driven the evolution of many lemur traits, including seasonal breeding and the ability to store fat for lean times. But Madagascar's isolation has created not just diversity, but also vulnerability. Lemurs evolved in a world without large predators, and many show little fear of potential threats. When humans arrived, bringing with them hunting, habitat destruction, and introduced species, lemur populations plummeted. Giant lemurs, some as large as gorillas, went extinct within centuries of human arrival. Today, lemurs are among the most endangered mammals on Earth, with more than 90% of species threatened with extinction. The forests they depend on are disappearing, cleared for agriculture and logging. If current trends continue, much of the diversity that accumulated over 50 million years of evolution could be lost within a few human generations. The patterns we see on Madagascar and in island bird radiations, explosive diversification following colonization, adaptation to vacant ecological niches, and deep vulnerability to disruption emerge repeatedly on islands around the world. But islands do not just foster diversification. They also drive other kinds of evolutionary change, transformations in size, shape, and capability that reveal how powerfully isolation can reshape life. One of the most striking patterns in island evolution is the tendency for animals to change size in predictable ways. Small species often evolve to become larger on islands, while large species tend to become smaller. This pattern, known as the island rule, has been documented across many groups of animals, from mammals and birds to reptiles, and even some invertebrates. The mechanisms driving these size changes are still debated, but several factors seem to play important roles. For small animals, islands often provide release from predation pressure and competition. On the mainland, a mouse-sized rodent must constantly watch for predators, owls and snakes and foxes that hunt anything small and edible. It must also compete with many other small mammals for food and space. On an island, especially a small or remote one, many of these predators and competitors may be absent. Without the need to stay small and agile to evade capture, and with more resources available per individual, natural selection may favor larger body size. Larger animals can defend territories more effectively, survive harsh conditions better, and may have access to food sources that smaller individuals cannot exploit. The result is island gigantism, the evolution of unusually large forms of typically small animals. The Komodo dragon, the largest living lizard, is a classic example. Found on a few small islands in Indonesia, Komodo dragons can reach lengths of 3 meters and weights exceeding 70 kilograms. They are apex predators on their islands, taking prey as large as deer and water buffalo. While their evolutionary history is complex, and there is debate about whether they truly represent island gigantism, or are instead the last survivors of a once more widespread lineage of giant monitors, they certainly illustrate the potential for reptiles to evolve impressive size on islands. Smaller scale examples of island gigantism are easier to document. The St Kilda field mouse, found on a remote Scottish island, is about twice the size of its mainland relatives. Giant tortoises, once found on many oceanic islands, including the Galapagos, Seychelles, and Mascarenes, evolved to enormous sizes, some exceeding 200 kilograms. These tortoises had few predators and abundant vegetation, and their large size may have helped them survive long periods without food or water, as they could store more fat and metabolize it slowly. Island gigantism is not limited to animals. Even plants show the pattern. On some isolated islands, herbs that grow to modest heights on the mainland evolve into shrubs or even small trees, a phenomenon known as insular woodiness. The sunflowers of St. Helena, now extinct, grew into woody shrubs several meters tall. In New Zealand's subantarctic islands, megaherbs, giant herbaceous plants with enormous leaves and flowers, dominate the landscape. Their size a response to the unique climate and lack of browsing mammals. While small animals tend to grow larger on islands, large animals often become smaller. Island dwarfism has been documented in elephants, hippos, deer, and other large mammals. The mechanisms driving this pattern are somewhat different from those behind island gigantism. Large animals require substantial amounts of food to sustain their body mass. On small islands, food resources may be limited compared to continental ecosystems. A smaller body size means lower energy requirements, allowing a population to survive on less food. Smaller animals also reach reproductive maturity faster, which can be advantageous in unpredictable island environments where population crashes might occur due to storms, droughts, or other disturbances. Dwarf elephants once lived on many Mediterranean islands, including Sicily, Malta, Cyprus, and Crete. Some species stood less than 1 meter tall at the shoulder, smaller than a pony, compared to their mainland ancestors, which would have been several meters tall. These elephants probably reached the islands during ice ages, when sea levels were lower, and land bridges or short water crossings allowed them to colonize. Once isolated, they evolved smaller size over thousands of generations. Dwarf hippos followed a similar pattern on Madagascar and several Mediterranean islands, shrinking to a fraction of the size of their mainland relatives. The island rule is not absolute. Not all small species become giants on islands, and not all large species become dwarfs. The pattern emerges most clearly when scientists analyze large datasets of many island populations. And even then, the effect varies depending on the type of animal, the size of the island, its degree of isolation, and other factors. Some groups show the pattern more strongly than others. Rodents tend toward gigantism, carnivores and large herbivores toward dwarfism. Birds show more variable patterns, with some lineages conforming to the rule and others not. Amphibians, interestingly, tend mostly toward gigantism regardless of their starting size. Climate also plays a role. On cold islands, small animals may evolve larger size to conserve heat more efficiently, since a larger body has a lower surface area to volume ratio and loses heat more slowly. Seasonal variation in food availability can favor larger body size in reptiles, which can better survive lean periods when they have more stored energy. The complexity of these patterns reveals that the island rule is not a simple law, but rather an emergent pattern arising from multiple ecological and evolutionary processes, interacting in the unique conditions of island life. Perhaps no consequence of island evolution is as striking or as tragic as the loss of flight in birds. Islands around the world are home to flightless birds, species that descended from flying ancestors, but whose wings have withered over generations into useless stubs or disappeared entirely. New Zealand is particularly famous for its flightless birds, both living and extinct. Before humans arrived, more than half of New Zealand's native landbirds were flightless, or had severely reduced powers of flight. The reasons lie in the unique evolutionary history of these isolated islands. New Zealand separated from the supercontinent Gondwana about 80 million years ago, drifting away from Australia and into the South Pacific. For most of its subsequent history, New Zealand had no land mammals except for a few species of bats. There were no terrestrial predators prowling the forest floor, no foxes or weasels or wild cats. The main predators of birds were other birds, large eagles and falcons that hunted from the air. In the absence of ground-based threats, birds that spent time on the forest floor foraging for food faced little danger. Flight is energetically expensive, requiring large flight muscles, a lightweight skeleton, and high metabolic rates. For birds that did not need to escape ground predators or travel long distances to find food, flight became less of an advantage and more of a burden. Natural selection favored birds that invested less energy in maintaining flight capability, and more in other traits. Wings shrank, flight muscles diminished, bones grew heavier and stronger, better suited for walking and running. The energy saved could be used for other purposes, growing larger, producing more offspring, storing more fat reserves. Over millions of years, many lineages of New Zealand birds lost the ability to fly entirely. The most spectacular examples were the moas, a group of flightless birds that ranged from turkey-sized to truly enormous. The giant moa, the largest of the 9 species, stood over 3 meters tall and weighed up to 270 kilograms, making it one of the tallest birds that ever lived. Moas were herbivores, browsers that fed on leaves, fruits, and shoots. They had no wings at all, not even vestigial stumps. The only birds ever to completely lose the pectoral girdle. They fill the ecological role that large grazing and browsing mammals would have occupied on other continents, their size and strength protecting them from avian predators. Moas are extinct now, hunted to oblivion within a few centuries of human arrival in New Zealand, around 1250 to 1300. But other flightless birds survive, though many are critically endangered. The kiwi, New Zealand's national symbol, is a small flightless bird with hair-like feathers, a long probing beak equipped with nostrils at the tip, and powerful legs for digging. Kiwis are nocturnal, spending their days in burrows and emerging at night to hunt for worms, grubs, and insects. They lay enormous eggs, among the largest relative to body size of any bird, each egg taking up about 20% of the mother's body weight. The takahe, a large flightless rail, was thought extinct until a small population was rediscovered in the mountains of the South Island in 1948. Takahes are vegetarian, feeding on the tough leaves of tussock grasses. They have powerful beaks for nipping vegetation and strong legs for walking through difficult terrain. Their flightlessness made them vulnerable to introduced predators, and the species barely survived. Today, intensive conservation efforts have brought the takahe back from the brink, with populations on predator-free islands and in a few protected mainland sites. Perhaps the most extraordinary of New Zealand's flightless birds is the kakapo, the world's only flightless parrot. Kakapo are large, heavy birds, with males weighing up to 4 kilograms. They are nocturnal and herbivorous, feeding on a variety of plants, including leaves, bark, and fruits. They cannot fly, but they are excellent climbers, using their strong legs and beak to ascend into trees, to feed, and occasionally parachuting down, using their small wings to slow their fall. Kakapo have a unique breeding system called lekking, where males gather in traditional display areas and compete to attract females by producing deep booming calls that carry through the forest for kilometers. Females visit the lek, choose a mate based on his display, and then raise the chicks alone without help from the male. Kakapo were once widespread across New Zealand, but the arrival of humans brought catastrophe. Maori hunted them for food and feathers. European settlers brought rats, stoats, and cats, predators against which the slow-moving, ground-dwelling kakapo had no defense. By the mid-20th century, kakapo were nearly extinct. Conservationists managed to save the species by moving all surviving birds to predator-free islands, where they are intensively managed. Every kakapo alive today has a name and is monitored throughout its life. The population has grown from a low of about 50 birds in the 1990s to over 200 today. But the species remains critically endangered, its future dependent on continued human intervention. The story of New Zealand's flightless birds illustrates both the creative power of island evolution and the fragility of the species it produces. In the absence of mammalian predators, birds evolved in directions impossible on continents, filling ecological roles usually occupied by mammals, becoming terrestrial herbivores, ground-dwelling omnivores, and even, in one case, an apex predator, Haast's eagle, the largest eagle known to have existed, which preyed on moas and went extinct along with them. But this evolutionary experimentation came at a cost. When the environment changed, when predators finally arrived, these specialized flightless birds had nowhere to run and no way to adapt quickly enough. The vulnerability of island species to introduced predators and competitors is not limited to New Zealand. It is a global pattern, one that has played out on islands everywhere humans have settled. Islands account for only about 5% of Earth's land area, yet they are home to nearly 20% of all bird and plant species. This concentration of biodiversity makes islands incredibly valuable for conservation, but it also makes them incredibly vulnerable. Island species evolved in communities that were often much simpler than continental ones. On many islands, whole groups of organisms were absent. There might be birds, but no mammals, or insects, but no ants, or plants, but no large herbivores. Species evolved in the absence of certain selective pressures, and so never developed defenses against them. Flightless birds never evolved fear of ground predators because there were none. Plants never evolved thorns to deter browsing mammals because mammals were absent. Nesting birds never learned to hide their nests from rats because rats did not exist on the island. When humans arrived, they brought with them a suite of species that had evolved on continents under very different conditions. Rats, cats, pigs, goats, mongooses, snakes. These animals were generalists, adapted to survive in a wide range of environments and to exploit many kinds of food sources. They were also experienced in dealing with competition and predation, shaped by millions of years of evolution in complex continental ecosystems. When these continental invaders encountered island species, the outcome was often catastrophic for the natives. Rats are among the most devastating of introduced predators. They reached many islands accidentally, stowing away on ships and boats, escaping when vessels anchored or wrecked on island shores. Rats are omnivorous and adaptable, able to eat almost anything. On islands, they feed voraciously on the eggs and chicks of ground nesting birds, on lizards and insects, on seeds and fruits. They can swim, climb, and squeeze through tiny spaces, making them nearly impossible for island birds to escape. Studies have shown that rats are implicated in the extinction or severe decline of hundreds of island bird species worldwide. They continue to threaten many of the remaining island endemics today. Cats, introduced as pets or to control rats, often became feral and developed a taste for native birds and reptiles. On many islands, cats have driven species to extinction or near extinction. The Guadalupe storm petrel, a seabird that bred only on Guadalupe Island off the coast of Mexico, was exterminated by feral cats by the early 20th century. The Stevens Island wren, a tiny flightless bird from a small island near New Zealand, was famously wiped out by the lighthouse keeper's cat, which brought dead wrens to the door repeatedly until there were none left. Mongooses were deliberately introduced to many islands in the Caribbean, Pacific, and elsewhere to control rats and snakes. But mongooses are diurnal and hunt during the day, while rats are nocturnal, so the two species rarely encountered each other. Instead, mongooses preyed heavily on ground-nesting birds, lizards, and other native animals. In Hawaii, the introduction of mongooses has been linked to the decline of many native bird species. On some islands, conservationists now work to eradicate mongooses to protect what remains of the native fauna. Large herbivores like goats, pigs, and deer can be equally devastating, though in different ways. Goats, in particular, are remarkably destructive. They eat nearly any vegetation, stripping hillsides bare and preventing forest regeneration. On many islands, feral goat populations have transformed lush forests into barren landscapes, eroding soils and eliminating habitat for native plants and animals. The Galapagos Islands suffered severe damage from feral goats introduced centuries ago. Conservation efforts have successfully eradicated goats from several of the islands, and the recovery of native vegetation has been dramatic, with forests regenerating and endemic species rebounding. Perhaps the most insidious of introduced species are the ones we cannot see, the diseases and parasites that hitchhike on birds, mammals, and insects. In Hawaii, mosquitoes arrived in the 19th century, probably in water barrels on ships. These mosquitoes carry avian malaria and avian pox, diseases to which continental birds have some resistance, but to which Hawaiian birds, having evolved in the absence of such diseases, have virtually none. The result has been catastrophic. Native Hawaiian honeycreepers that come into contact with infected mosquitoes almost invariably die. The diseases have restricted many honeycreeper species to high elevation forests above the range of mosquitoes, which cannot survive in the cold temperatures above about 5,000 feet. But climate change is warming these mountains, allowing mosquitoes to move higher, shrinking the safe zones year by year. The statistics are sobering. Since 1500, about 61% of all documented extinctions have occurred on islands, despite islands representing such a small fraction of global land area. Of birds alone, more than 90% of species that have gone extinct in the last 500 years lived on islands. Today, island species make up a disproportionate share of the world's most threatened animals and plants. About 41% of all critically endangered terrestrial vertebrates are found on islands. A recent study identified nearly 1,200 highly threatened vertebrate species breeding on just over 1,200 islands worldwide, with invasive mammals present on 97% of those islands. The outlook might seem grim, but there is also reason for hope. Conservation biologists have developed increasingly sophisticated techniques for protecting island species and restoring island ecosystems. One of the most effective approaches is the eradication of invasive predators from islands. By removing rats, cats, or other introduced species, conservationists can give native species a chance to recover. Island eradication programs have become more ambitious over time. Early efforts focused on small, uninhabited islands where eradication was logistically simple. But as techniques improved, larger and more challenging islands became targets. Today, rats have been successfully eradicated from islands totaling more than 700 square kilometers. Entire archipelagos have been freed of invasive mammals, allowing native birds, reptiles, and plants to recover. The results can be spectacular. On Palmyra Atoll in the South Pacific, the eradication of rats led to a 5,000% increase in the growth of native seedlings, as rats no longer ate the seeds before they could germinate. On islands in New Zealand, where predators have been removed, populations of native birds have rebounded dramatically. The takahe, brought back from near extinction, now has secure populations on several predator-free islands. The kakapo breeding program, while still precarious, has seen steady population growth as managers have learned to manipulate the bird's breeding cycle and protect nests from any remaining threats. Even in Hawaii, there are success stories. Conservation efforts have brought several honeycreeper species back from the brink. Captive breeding programs are being developed for the most endangered species. There are ambitious plans to use gene editing or other techniques to make mosquitoes unable to transmit avian diseases, which could allow honeycreepers to reclaim lowland forests. On Floriana Island in the Galapagos, a complex project is underway to eradicate all invasive mammals, from rats and cats to feral pigs and donkeys, to restore the island to something approximating its pre-human state. If successful, it will be one of the most ambitious conservation projects ever undertaken. These efforts require enormous resources, expertise, and commitment. They also require something else, a recognition that island ecosystems, with their unique evolutionary histories and irreplaceable biodiversity, are worth saving. Islands remind us that evolution is not just a theory, but a process we can observe, that isolation and time can transform the familiar into the extraordinary, that life is endlessly creative in finding ways to survive and diversify. They also remind us of our responsibility. The species that evolved on islands over millions of years are now in our hands, vulnerable to our actions, but also capable of recovery if we choose to protect them. When you see a bird perched on a branch, it is easy to forget the vast sweep of evolutionary history behind it. But on an island, that history becomes visible. Every unique beak, every flightless wing, every oversized or undersized body tells a story of adaptation, of populations shaped by the particular challenges and opportunities of island life. These stories are precious, not just for the scientific insights they provide, but for what they represent: the endless inventiveness of evolution, the beauty of diversity, the fragility of life in a changing world. Islands are living laboratories, experiments in evolution that have been running for millions of years. They show us what happens when populations are isolated, when new environments select for new traits, when life diversifies to fill empty niches. They are among the most biodiverse places on Earth, home to species found nowhere else, creatures that have evolved solutions to problems of survival that are unique in all the world. And they are among the most threatened, their specialized inhabitants vulnerable to the disruptions that come with human activity. As we move deeper into an era of rapid environmental change, understanding island evolution becomes more important than ever. Islands offer lessons about how species respond to isolation, how ecosystems recover from disturbance, how quickly evolution can act when selective pressures are strong. They are testing grounds for conservation strategies, places where we can see the effects of our interventions clearly and quickly. And they are refugees, havens where species that have disappeared from continents still cling to existence, waiting for a chance to recover if we can give them the time and space they need. The next time you hear about an island, whether it is a remote speck in the Pacific or a patch of forest surrounded by development, remember that it may be home to evolutionary wonders, species that exist nowhere else, products of millions of years of isolation and adaptation. Remember too that these wonders are fragile, that they depend on conditions that can be easily disrupted, that their survival is not guaranteed. But remember also that we have the tools to protect them, that conservation works when we commit to it, that island ecosystems can recover if we remove the threats and give them time. Islands of evolution are scattered across the globe, from tropical atolls to temperate archipelagos, from Madagascar to New Zealand, from the Galapagos to Hawaii. Each tells its own story of how life adapts in isolation, how diversity arises, how ecosystems function in the absence of certain players, and the presence of others. Together, they form a living archive of evolutionary processes, a reminder that evolution is not something that happened in the distant past, but something that continues all around us, shaping life in ways both subtle and profound. If you found this exploration of island evolution calming, enlightening, or thought-provoking, please consider leaving a like on this video and subscribing to Bedtime Biology for more journeys into the quiet wonders of the natural world. And if you have suggestions for future topics or thoughts about the islands we have visited tonight, feel free to share them in the comments below. Where you are watching from, what islands you have visited, what evolutionary stories capture your imagination, your voice adds to the conversation. Until next time, rest well, and remember that somewhere on a distant island, evolution is still at work, quietly shaping life in ways we are only beginning to understand.